Hi everyone, I'm Joe. Today it's time for me to do a book review of The We Three Men, written by Terry Pratchett. This was first published in 2003. It is a fantasy novel, and it is the 30th novel set within the Discworld universe, of which there are 41 in total, and it is the first of 5 novels based around the character sub-series of Tiffany Aching, who is obviously the main character. So I'll talk about the synopsis, then I'll talk about the characters, world building, that sort of thing. So, Tiffany Aching is a 12-year-old girl. She is living in an area called the Chalk, known for obviously its soil, which is obviously very chalky and very soft. Obviously big fields of wheat, and this is very much taking an idea of part of the UK and amplifying it in a very particular way to make it sound, in this circumstance, very nice but also very strange, and I'll get to that later on. But it's an interesting environment and one that Tiffany Aching enjoys because she loves where she lives. The Chalk is a lovely place to live with her quite large family, and it is her family that presents basically the trigger point for the plot of this, because basically at the start of the book, she is going down to a pond one day, and she sort of ends up having some sort of strange monster or creature coming out of a pond, and she happens to basically have with her a frying pan, which she hits this monster or creature on the head with, and it goes away. So the frying pan, and indeed that is why she has one on the front cover, becomes important to her character and the book in general. Basically, this creature that is coming out of the water is a sign of things to come, because basically history is returning, and not just the normal parts of history where you think, oh well, it might be the way people are living or certain creatures are returning. This is something alternative which I don't want to talk about, because this is something that I wasn't sure about myself when I started reading this book, so I don't want to spoil it. Let's just say that it's a part of history that is very dark and quite dangerous to the Chalk and the world in general, the disc in general. And it's one that, frankly, Tiffany has to get involved in, because her little brother gets kidnapped. And basically she ends up having to go and try and rescue him if she can, with the help of several other characters, one of them being a character called Roland, who is the son of the local lord or king, I can't remember which now. And it becomes a very interesting little plot line, and one group of help that she gets assistance with is the We Three Men, who are very small. I mean, literally they're like a few inches tall, essentially blue skinned, very Scottish based pixies. Basically, they don't like being called gnomes, they prefer being called pixies. They like to fight, drink, and generally steal things. Not necessarily in the order, that's literally what they say of themselves. And T. Pratchett plays up to the fact that they are essentially very small, ridiculously stereotypical pixies that happen to be Scottish, and he has fun with that. And now the We Three Men have been featured briefly in one of the earlier Witches books. For the record, the We Three Men and the Tiffany Aching books are not sequels or direct continuations of these Witches books as such, although they do carry that spirit of the Witches books actually on, because the Witches series books at this point have been sort of ended, and now Tiffany Aching is sort of not taking over the place of the Witches, but not one directly. Sort of is, but it's a different feel to it than the Witches book, and one that I really liked. And regardless of this, after she gets involved with Tiffany with this plot to rescue her brother and things start going outwards from there, and characters from the past, and indeed at least one other older Discworld novel gets involved. And overall, yeah, it's a very interesting plotline and one that I really enjoyed. One of the reasons why I enjoyed the book was the character of Tiffany Aching. Now, if you know me, you know that often when books involve very young characters, I'm always a little bit wary, because young characters in books can often end up being introduced in such a way that they don't make any sense. They're often massively more intelligent than anybody their age should be. Even under circumstances, it should be remarkably remote that somebody that not just intelligent but mature and able to cope with things. Somebody, often young characters, can't do that, and in books that's not always the best thing about them, where a character will be too mature for their age. With this, Tiffany, she kind of is that, but there is a reason for it. I mean, for one thing, her education. There is no schools in the area, so she's learnt by going to a wandering fair and going to some booths that the people are setting up, where she's literally where they teach whatever subject that they happen to have knowledge of. So like a geography person, somebody knows history, will set up a booth and will just literally be teaching geography and obviously probably a bit of history about the areas that they go to people for a small amount of money or trade. And indeed, that's how she's learned. And she does have a dictionary as well, but nobody ever told her how you use a dictionary as such. I mean, she's not used to having a dictionary, so her way of understanding a dictionary was to read it just like this book, starting from the first page and going through to the last. So her word usage is strange, to say the least, but it does help at times. And Tiffany is a very interesting character. She's developed really well, and the reasons why she's this way is explained, as I said, and also the reasons why she interacts with the other characters in a very interesting way is also explained and developed well, because obviously she's got a big family. She interacts with them. They're only lightly described, relatively speaking, in words, but the images that Pratchett creates are, as always, phenomenal. He doesn't use a lot of words to describe them, yet the image you have for each member of the family and the way they are the family is really strong. You know what to expect with the Aching family and the villages nearby and that sort of thing. You know where everybody has to be, because just the way he describes it, regardless of whether he uses 1,000 words or whether he uses one, you still understand what the area is like, what the people are like, and this way of him creating this world is fantastic, as it always is. And here he's introducing not just a character but an area, the chalk. Almost with almost all the previous books, apart from the very early ones, generally they're in areas that you have at least heard mentioned before, and often the character sets are ones that you've briefly heard mentioned before. I mean, the guards were briefly mentioned in books before the guards were actually a character sub-series themselves, and so on. With this, the chalk is never mentioned before, and neither is Tiffany Aching. This is a very new environment. There's no history of it, no connection to previous books in those earlier books. However, he does something a bit different, where he actually does it in reverse. He's directly mentioning other elements in the world, often the witches books, but he also does mention elements from previous Discworld books as well, world events that may have happened. And this world building of the chalk with the characters is a really interesting one, and one that I really did enjoy overall. Now, as to the ideas or the themes in the book, one of them is blatantly independence. Obviously, Tiffany Aching is a very headstrong young girl. She knows her own mind, or at least she thinks she does, and she's very focused, let's say. And it's about her independence, her trying to find who she is as a person and where she fits into the world. But the other thing that it also focuses on related to this is responsibility. Yes, You may be independent, and it may be, you may want to have free speech and free thought and such. But that doesn't mean that you've got to be free from responsibility. And indeed, one of the things you want to be responsible for is your free speech. Yes, you can have free speech, and indeed I believe in free speech in a global sense. But you've also got to be responsible for it. Yes, you can say what you want, but if you say something that is truly insulting and truly unpleasant to somebody, yes, you're entitled to say it. They're also entitled to get very upset and not like what you're saying, because you're basically insulting them to their face. So, you've got to live with the possibly rather problematic result. And this book deals with those two. It's the independence, but the responsibility of that independence, which is an interesting one. And also that links into the other major aspect and idea of the book, which is family. Family is very important to Tiffany Aching. Obviously, it was very important to Terry Pratchett himself. If you know anything about him, you know that family was crucial to him as an author and as a human. And family comes into that independence and the responsibility, because of course Tiffany Aching wants to be independent within a family, but she wants to have a certain responsibility as well. Although she complains about, obviously people think, oh yes, I don't want responsibility in my family. Actually, most people do. They're just not aware of it in that sense. And this is an interesting one, and the ideas and themes are really well done, and I just really overall love this book. So basically, in summary, I would say this is a very well written book with an interesting main character, all interesting supporting characters, a very interesting new world for Discworld fans to discover, and indeed fantasy fans to discover. And by the way, this is actually one of the few Discworld books that is actually cast as children's fantasy. All the other Discworld books are, as far as I'm aware, classed as fantasy. This is actually children's fantasy. Personally, I don't even notice a difference. Still, Terry Pratchett is still brilliant. I would heavily recommend this if you are a Discworld fan, and I would recommend this to everybody, frankly. You almost could read this independently of the other Discworld books, by the way. Personally, I wouldn't recommend this because I personally like the idea of reading through from the very first Discworld novel to the last, so you see the evolution of his writing. But with this, actually, honestly, you could read this as the first novel if you wanted. It's developed enough, and also it doesn't link quite as blatantly to other world building, because it's a new area as certain other Discworld novels, so it could actually be a good choice, to be honest. I don't know, obviously this isn't my first, so it's hard for me to actually judge that. Overall, I would highly recommend this, and we'll keep praising this for a long time to come. And with that said, that is it for this review. So if you've read this, or you've read other Discworld novels and you want to have a talk about them, then please leave a comment. All my social media links, as well as a link to this book, can be found in the description box below. Oh, and I just thought I'd best mention, yes, in case you're wondering, this is the Discworld Library Collector's Editions. They did all the other Discworld books, published them, apart from the 5 Tiffany Aching books, until 2 years ago, when I believe they had an issue with the publishing rights for them, and they finally managed to do some sort of deal, and they managed to get the 5 Tiffany Aching books available to them and publish them in a book that is similar, although not exactly similar, to all the other Discworld Collector's Library editions. The 5 Tiffany Achings have a slightly different design on the cover, not by too much though, so it does fit in, and I'm very happy that they did this, because now I've actually got an entire matched set. And with that, that is it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.